Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Ohio Stormwater Association workshop, developing 9-element non-point source implementation strategic plans. We have a great agenda plan for today. This is the first session of a two-part workshop. Our second session will be held on October 7th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. And since you are registered for today's workshop, you are automatically registered for the second session. An email reminder will be sent with a link to join, similar to what you received to join today's workshop. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all speakers join as in muted mode and without video. If you have any questions or if you're having technical issues, please feel free to use the chat option, which is in kind of the center of the bottom of your screen. We will also be monitoring questions as they're coming in throughout the speakers' presentations. So please, at any moment, if you have any questions, type it in the chat. You will also notice that today's session is being recorded up in the upper left-hand corner and will be made available afterwards. You can also see in the green box in the center at the top who is actually presenting at that moment. Also on the right, you will notice that there is a different gallery views that you can select different options for how you would like to view this session today. If at any point you would like to leave the meeting, there's an end button in the bottom right. If you have a reaction or you want to share some emotions or there's some emojis that you can share with the group. And please, if you have any questions at any moment, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will get to them. We will also take any questions that you have regarding the presentation, and you can type those in the chat and we will address them at the very end of both presentations today. So before I hand it over to our first speaker, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Ohio Stormwater Association. This is the group that is bringing this workshop to you today. The organization is dedicated to advancing the management of stormwater and related natural resources through education, leadership, watershed-based coordination, and technical assistance in Ohio. The organization is a not-for-profit and non-political organization. Here's a list of our board of directors, as well as our board members. We are always looking for more committee members. We have a committee for education, which is the committee that is bringing this workshop to you today, and also the other webinars that we've hosted and other educational events throughout the year. We also have a marketing and membership committee, regulatory, and transportation committee. If you are interested in joining the Ohio Stormwater Association, you can go to ohioswa.com or wamo.org and select stormwater as your area of interest. And that way you can join the association. We would love to have more members. So for today's agenda, we will have the first speaker will provide an introduction and background to the NPS program, the non-point source implementation strategies program. And then we will also give a guidance update as far as what's new with the plan, frequently asked questions and professional tips, and then we will wrap up with tools and resources. As I mentioned earlier, there will be an October 7th second session for this workshop, and that will be on NPS case studies. We have 4 excellent speakers lined up for that, and if you're signed up for this one, you will automatically be signed up for that one. So we hope you can join us. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. It is Greg Nageotte, who, give me a second. He has a bachelor's with the University of Oklahoma and a master's from Indiana University. Greg's immersion in watershed management began with the Logan Soil and Water Conservation District, working on the Indian Lake Watershed project. He then moved to Shelby Soil and Water Conservation District to administer the Loramie Valley Alliance before joining the Division of Soil and Water Conservation in 2000, where he now co-reviews watershed plans with Ohio EPA and administers the division's grants including soil and water conservation district watershed grants. So with that, I will hand it over to Greg.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. It'll take me a second here to share my screen.
Oh, my apologies.
How are we looking? Am I sharing the right screen?
Yep, looks great, Greg.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to start out by thanking the Ohio Stormwater Association and Teresa and Felicia specifically for inviting us to help out with this workshop. As you might know, this was intended to be a face-to-face, and hopefully we can do that soon enough. But we'll make do with this, as we have been for months now. I also wanted to thank Dana Leskowitz, our administrator of WAMO. She is behind the scenes helping us as well. And you know, these kind of partnerships really go a long way in helping get these things out there. So with that, I'll start off with the basics. I'm going to handle these first two bullets on the agenda here and try to get through this part fairly quickly, because then Rick is going to follow me up and really dive deep on these topics. So I'm just setting the stage, introducing us to some key points and terminology and background. So we'll just jump right in. What is a non-point source implementation strategy? And you know, we get into questions about what do we call these things. Some people call them 9-element plans, some call them NPSS. Both are correct. There are other plans that are called 9 key element plans, however. So to be most specific, you want to call them NPSS, but it doesn't really matter. These plans are Ohio's framework for making sure that you are including all 9 key element plans in your watershed action plan, or watershed-based plan, rather. They are watershed-based, but not just any old watershed. We're not just picking arbitrary watersheds out there, which you can do. You know, we know you can pick any point on the landscape and draw a watershed around it. What we're looking at are the HUC 12s, which Ohio EPA has incorporated as their watershed assessment units. And so that's our most granular, that's our geographic unit upon which we're basing these. They are intended to be science-based. We want to start with the best available data, which then feeds into developing the goals and objectives and critical areas. And we'll talk way more about all these things as we go. But just a moment on data. What is best available data? Ohio EPA data is the best. And then data from other you know, entities, agencies, research entities, that kind of thing. Down to even including observation. So we start with the best, but any data that tells you have a water quality problem, we can work with. These are very project focused. In the end, we want details on ready to go projects where we just add money and we can get those projects done. That's the ultimate goal of these plans, is to drill you down and funnel you down to where you have ready to go fundable projects. They are local, although there's a lot here that you can fill in the blank with our framework in terms of taking the Ohio EPA data and information and other stakeholder derived information and build these plans. You know, there are folks that probably do it at a desktop. Are they going to be good, effective plans that way? Not likely. We need a lot of stakeholder involvement throughout the process to ground truth, to make sure these projects are really ready to go. And so that stakeholder involvement is really important to make these local. These are state endorsed plans based on US EPA guidance. And US EPA has given Ohio the approval authority on these. So they don't have to go to Chicago for US EPA approval. However, we do closely follow the guidance we've worked out with US EPA. And they may spot check these from time to time. A NPSS is a grant program requirement for 319 and for GRLI Great Lakes Restoration Initiative subawards through Ohio EPA. So it is a gateway, a funding gateway for those pots of money. So going back a little bit, what are the 9 key elements? US EPA, among their first references, may have been referenced earlier, but in a very rough form, the 9 elements or elements, key elements, were referenced in 2003 guidance. If you recall, if you've developed a watershed action plan between 2001 and 2015, we did base that framework on those key elements. However, Ohio EPA has refined those over time, placing more emphasis on critical areas. And finally, in 2013, US EPA issued guidance that states must utilize 319 funds only for projects that include 9 essential elements. So that really pushed the 9 essential elements down to the project level versus the full plan level. And that may become more clear in a minute. But that's why we have so much emphasis on very detailed projects in these plans. For more on that, very good publication from US EPA. You can Google this. It's the EPA Handbook for Developing Watershed Plans, 2008. And there are links to that from our sites as well. So in a paraphrased form, obviously these are written out in sentence form from US EPA, but in essence, these are the things, the elements that you would need to have in a NPSIS or any watershed action plan for 319 rather. So we need to reference the causes and sources of pollution, and those have very distinct definitions. We need to see the non-point source management measures. Basically, what are you going to do? Water quality-based goals. We're not looking at other water resource concerns such as water distribution or availability or things like that. We're looking strictly at water quality. Where do you intend to get your technical and financial assistance to implement? Information and education plan for projects. What's your schedule for projects? Milestones, what are your interim measures? What criteria do you use for implementation and critical areas? And finally, how do you monitor success? How are you going to evaluate success for those projects? So as I said earlier, the framework we've developed ensures that all these are included, and this framework was approved by US EPA in 2016. So a little bit of history. As I mentioned, the Watershed Action Plan Development Guide was developed by Ohio EPA in partnership with many other agencies and stakeholders. And that resulted in a lot of watershed action plans across the state. You can still access those through the Ohio EPA website as reference documents. They do not carry any weight now as far as ability to receive funds, but those were endorsed between 2004 and 2015. The new guidance, like I mentioned, improved our alignment with the US EPA 9 key elements as they were more currently being interpreted and communicated by US EPA. And as I mentioned, those elements are applied to detailed projects and much more refined critical areas. In developing this original guidance, Ohio EPA and ODA, that's Rick and myself, with consultation with a committee of experienced watershed planners, developed this guidance over a span of a couple of years actually. And it's been in use since 2016. The first plan was approved in 2017. The first NPSIS was approved in 2017. So our experience with this is still relatively new. And Rick and I are learning as we go in terms of reviewing. And, you know, when we developed this, we thought we had all the bases covered, but as with any program, participants are great at coming up with new things and throwing us new questions and curveballs, which we're happy to try to adapt to and improve the program as we go. So sorry about that. The guidance update has been underway this year. Having the COVID-19 shut down and putting us all in our respective home offices has presented some of a challenge in terms of communicating on that, but we are moving forward. We've had some meetings with our trustee group of experienced developers. This includes soil and water conservation district staff, private consultants, watershed groups, and we've done some back and forth with our outline and early drafts of the plan, and asked for questions from this group that we definitely want to cover in the update, much of which Rick is going to try to go over in more detail with you as we move forward in this presentation. Our goal is to have this done by the end of the year. So now I'm just going to really quickly go over the basic components of a NPS and set the stage for Rick to do a deeper dive. So goals, as we mentioned, causes and sources need to be in this plan. So our goals are based on the causes of non-point source pollution. With Ohio EPA, this has a technical definition. These are really your measured parameters that determine whether you're in attainment or not. And we have near field parameters. These are based on water quality standards. The most common are bioindicators, ICI, IBI, habitat, fish, bugs, stream quality, and then also possibly nitrogen and phosphorus loads. Now, in the recent year, 2 years, we've added far field goals, and Rick will explain this further. We have specific load reduction goals for all the 12-digit HUCs in the Western Basin of Lake Erie, and we'd like to spread that further across the state. So I will leave that for Rick. Drilling down, objectives. Now now we're talking about the sources. So the sources lead to your objectives. These are land use based technical solutions. This is where we define the specific best management practices or measures that are going to be implemented to achieve your goals. These need to be numeric as well. So we're talking about specific acres, number of feet, or number of structures. And what are we shooting for objectives? Is it every single BMP that we could possibly implement in the watershed? No, that would not be ideal. What we want to look at is what is possible, what can be implemented in the next 10 years or so. So this really points to stakeholder involvement to understand really what can be implemented in that time frame. Critical areas. This has caused a lot of consternation since our first guidance, and I think we're making some changes and better direction on this. But essentially, these are the geographic focus areas for categories of objectives. So once we know what our objectives are, then we can start carving out critical areas. So for example, you have a cluster of objectives that have to do with stream restoration or riparian practices. They lead to linear sections of stream corridors, maybe specific sites for dam removal, things like that. Agricultural row crop practices. We want prioritized agricultural lands that need the treatment that you're being specific about in your objectives. Oftentimes this involves proximity to streams, soil testing levels, highly erodible land. Depending on what your problems are, your water quality issues related to agriculture, that's going to define your agricultural critical areas. Then we might also have these urban, suburban, shoreline, infrastructure, home sewage treatment. These are more cluster areas that are going to be drawn in your watershed based on where those areas are. And then finally, wetlands, as we know, could be a combination treatment for any of the above. So if you happen to have a wetland objective on its own, maybe it looks something like a combination of the above. Maybe wetlands are included in some of these other objectives. But these are just examples to show you that flow of how critical areas come from objectives. They are not merely arbitrary or political subdivisions of the watershed. If we see a 12-digit HUC divided into relatively equal sub-watersheds, and we're numbering the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are critical areas, you'll get a nice email back from us saying, try again. We're not just dividing the watershed up and saying they're each critical areas and we're going to have the same objectives in each critical areas. Those really cease being critical at that point. So they really need to follow the objectives. They may overlap or extend from adjacent NPS plans. You may have one small critical area for a very high value project. Let's say a downtown municipality wants to restore its stream as a water quality project and as an asset for the community. That may be its own critical area, just as an example. There is a new US EPA publication, critical source area identification and BMP selection. So we encourage you to look at that. So on projects, most 9 key elements are satisfied with project summary sheets. Excuse me, short term, we consider 1 to 3 years. These should be shovel ready and project summary sheets are required. For the medium term and long term, which 3 to 7 years, more than 7 years, we do not require project summary sheets, but you can include those projects as holding places. Again, these serve as grant pre-proposals. They should have enough detail in them that any grant funder would look at those and understand exactly what it is you're doing and what you want to do, how you're going to do it. And we generally see 2 types of projects. Either you have the site-based project, like a dam removal, or a cost share incentive project that might span a critical area, agricultural critical area in your watershed, and you're going to offer a number of practices through cost share. These are typical types of projects. So what's new in the guidance, in the update we're working on? We want to do more of offer a step-by-step approach. This is somewhat achieved through the template, but not exactly, and I'll get to that in a minute. We have obviously more frequently asked questions at this point because we've had a lot more people trying to develop these and coming up with those questions. We have a lot more examples to share, so we'll be taking advantage of that. I already mentioned the far field load reduction goals and obviously more on critical area development, more tools and resources, fortunately, and more on stakeholder involvement. You should continue to hear these themes as we move forward. A little bit on the step-by-step approach, and hopefully this isn't too complicated. It works for my brain, but we'll see. Over here, and this is time, this is the arrow of time, and you know, in the template, in the outline, in the table of contents, the plan should be laid out in this order because this makes sense to a reader. A watershed summary. What was your public participation like, your stakeholder involvement? Water quality characterization leads to the critical areas, the goals, the objectives, and then you drill down finally to the most detailed, which is the project. However, in developing the plan, we need to think about it a little bit differently. We would recommend that you start with the water quality characterization. This is really what the basics of your watershed's water quality status. And then from that, you can develop the goals. From the goals, develop objectives, and then critical areas from objectives. And then the watershed profile, which is the summary, you do that last. And then these are the things out here, public participation and projects. We should be zigzagging back and forth with public participation or stakeholder involvement at every stage of this. One public meeting does not make for public participation. Let's say you have a public meeting early on and you get a lot of great information about what people think the problems are. Well, that's great. Help develop that part of it. At some point, you need to go back to maybe a different set of stakeholders as you move through this to determine each of these, right down to the objectives and projects. Talking with those producers, landowners about what can be done on their property is something that SWCDs and NRCS has been doing for generations. No different here. We need to talk to those stakeholders and make sure when they get into a short-term project that it is ready to go. If we offer them money, they will sign up. So this stakeholder participation throughout the process cannot be overstated, as well as the projects. We're continuing to survey our stakeholders and talk to individuals, talk to organizations, and make this a broad effort to find out viable projects to meet our goals and objectives. Another question we get a lot is do it yourself or contracting. And I think the big takeaway here is there is no such thing as one or the other. A contractor can certainly help with aspects of the planning, including process management. They have typically great GIS mapping capability. They understand the data and know how to present it typically, and really good at things like literature review and beating the bushes for all the sources of data. Usually produce a more professional looking document. We've found that this costs, between $5,000 to $12,500 per. It's a real rough estimate. However, you cannot skip the stakeholder involvement, and the contractors may be less knowledgeable about your local stakeholders. So those local entities, typically the sponsors of these plans, whether it be a SWCD or local municipality, another county office, will still need to be involved to engage those stakeholders, conduct the outreach, support development of the objectives and project development. So there is no paying for this and getting it done without involvement. I just want to make that clear. So, and we look at these being developed in 3 to 6 months, maybe 500 hours total effort, just a ballpark. So the review process, and this is my last slide, and I'm going to jump off here and give Rick the balance of the time, which looks like we're doing all right. We ask that you keep us informed throughout the process. If you're thinking about jumping down this effort, give us a call, shoot us an email, let us know the HUCs that you're working on and hydrologic unit codes, and talk through it. Happy to give you early advice. We can look at chapters as you're getting through it, look at your critical areas. We fully support these being an iterative back and forth process. We do receive them completely done, and sometimes they get approved within the first review. So it's not to say the alternative doesn't work, but especially if you have a few under your belt. But in general, if you're starting this process, give us a ring. So what do? We look at the plans, we review according to these criteria, the 9 elements. We will send the Word document back with track changes so you see exactly what we're looking at in the comments. We would like those drafts in return, reference those comments so that we can look at those comment for comment. Did you respond to that? Did you make the changes? And then we can move on. We really try very hard to not add comments on subsequent reviews. That being said, if it's an early review and there's a lot more meaty content in a subsequent draft, obviously we're going to look at that material fresh. And then finally, most of your communication will come through Rick, and he will communicate the approval and post to the Ohio EPA website. And that is all I have for you at the moment. And I believe our plan is to hold questions for now, because what I shared with you is pretty general, and Rick may answer your questions. And then we'll try to deal with questions at the end there. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Great, thank you, Greg. That was a fantastic overview of the NPS plan. While we get Rick up and running, I'm going to introduce Rick Wilson. He has a bachelor's in civil engineering from the Ohio State University. For the past 13 years, Rick has worked as the lead technical engineering resource for Ohio EPA's non-point source 319 grant program. With a 26-year career at Ohio EPA, Rick has had diverse roles as wastewater engineer, site inspector, and a senior technical resource and contact within the Ohio EPA Division of Surface Water. Rick's duties have included permit compliance inspections at CAFOs, investigating and responding to manure-related complaints, monitoring of water quality, both ambient and complaint spill-related. Other duties have included TMDL development and implementation assistance relative to livestock and row crop agriculture, education and outreach to farming and livestock operations, industrial stakeholders, inland lake organizations, manure applicators, NPDES program inspection and permitting activities, and enforcement and litigation. Rick currently represents Ohio EPA, the Division of Surface Water, on several agricultural related boards and committees in Ohio. Rick grew up in Bucyrus, North Central Ohio, and now lives with his wife and kids near downtown Columbus, Ohio, in the city of Grandview Heights. So now I'd like to hand it over to Rick.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good. And you can see the first slide? Okay.
Yes.
Good to go. All right. Well, thank you for having us. Golly, I started thinking about, going through slide by slide here and how I explain to people over the phone or via email. And so really this is a triage of a lot of things that come across our desk and an effort to show you where to find some stuff, give you some tips. There's a lot packed in here, and this is gonna, some of you guys who have experience with this stuff are gonna follow on pretty well. Others I think might, if you're new, you could get lost, and there are opportunities throughout to ask questions and to call us anytime as you work through the process. So as I looked at these, I was like, gosh, someone, if that doesn't explain it all, golly, I hope they call us and we'll work through it. So keep that in mind. All right, next slide. Okay, so back in August of 2017, or actually we had a meeting where I presented, here's where we are with 9-element plans. This is from 3 years ago. Back then we had 31 9-element plans according to our process. We had some AMDATs that we're still using. We had some we call equivalent, which were TMDL related watershed action plans that were approved in Indiana. But how many do we have now? Let's see. 133 now in the state of Ohio, and you can see the green ones there, mostly in northern Ohio, and then we have a smattering of projects across southern Ohio. We do have an effort where we're going to be sending out contracts to develop about 20 or 22 more 9-element plans in this big area in south central Ohio. So that will be to address hypoxia goals for nitrogen. We also have a lot of effort recently in Northwest Ohio related to Western Basin load reduction goals. We've always had good participation from Northeast Ohio and organizations up there, and a fair amount of work from Western Ohio, Mercer County, Blanchard River Watershed, and then some new ones coming on in that region as well. So as far as I know there are about 40 more under development. There's 1,500 HUCs in all, so keep that in mind. But all of these hope to insert projects that can be funded through federal or other local programs. Frequently asked questions. So this is, you see here is the screenshot of our non-point source program webpage, especially where the tools are located. You'll see across the top here, you have approved 9-element plans. You can find a list of 9-element plans there, tools, and other resources. I'm going to get into this a little bit more later. Following on with Greg's step-by-step approach, I'm going to try, and I tried really hard to keep some sort of order to this, but I'm going to try to follow the development order with these questions. I'm going to try. All right, so here's one question. We just got assigned to do a 9-element plan. Now what? What do we do? So first thing you do is make sure you identify your stakeholders, state, county, soil and water, farming interests, parks, NRCS, all those who have a role in projects that could affect water quality positively or negatively. Virtual venues, I think, would be the way to go right now. Quite frankly, I really like the part where people have questions for us right now, and we can do a Teams meeting directly with one organization or one individual. That seems to be working well, and if you guys have the technology to do that, I would encourage that. There's a lot that you can do. You can share screens. You can do all sorts of stuff. So create a virtual venue, talk about the impaired waters practices and what the 9-element plans are about. Assign tasks, follow up with calls and meetings. A lot of time a contractor might help with that process. And like Greg said, stay in contact with us. We're here to answer questions and help you along. Greg had a slide on DIY versus contractor led. Quite frankly, when this whole process started, we said we need a process so people can get projects funded. And it's turned into what can we do overall in a watershed in a strategic way to bring solutions to our local watershed problems. So we've started with get this plan done. Let's write a 9-element plan that uses our project as a centerpiece or a bigger effort. So 9-element plans are not NPSs developed for a single entity, for a single project are not ideal, but we know we get them. That's how they started. But we're trying to get beyond that. These are long-term living documents, not just for one project. So the first ones can be a jumpstart for local stakeholders. And they have been. We've had some already on version 1.3, I think. Included with your 9-element plan and your public participation, we want to see that there's a description or an expressed description of what type of stakeholder involvement exists and will continue in order to keep it alive. A lot of times we get, like I said, for just one project, it's not clear that there's going to be anyone touching it after the one project is accomplished or proposed for funding. Contractors won't keep 9-element plans alive unless they're contractual arrangements otherwise. So the sponsor needs to plan for regular maintenance, planning, I called it planting and harvesting of 9-element plans once the initial version is approved. So there's new data comes available, new ideas for projects, new objectives, new critical areas may be developed or expanded or removed. So there's a lot that can be done, but the do-it-yourself sponsor organization has a lot to do. The contractor part, like Greg mentioned, they surely play a role with some of the technical and other work, but outreach is very important. Stakeholder involvement, more on that. We're gonna drill on this hard. We know that sometimes stakeholders are hard to find. Sometimes stakeholders don't want to be stakeholders, and that's where you want to leverage industry organizations, land grant institutions like Ohio State Extension. Make sure that the outreach is done and there's community buy-in for some of the projects. And there's big holes and gaps in a lot of these 9-element plans where more types of critical areas to address different types of impairments could be added if there was a leader or a stakeholder group that was willing to work toward that end. We know technical capacity is critical for SWCD-led projects, especially where there's row crop land managers and owners that you need to work with. I'm told, and that this isn't great news for the 9-element process, but the H2 Ohio stuff going on in Northwest Ohio has really taxed a lot of the staff capacity up there. And there's a concern, a little bit of concern without additional help or outreach from, say, OSU Extension and others. We might get into a lower, we might not see as much activity as we would like from those areas, at least with regard to 9-element plans and fundable 319 projects. Community buy-in is critical. So stakeholder involvement examples. When we first started seeing 9-element plans, we would get a vague section that says, hey, we had participation, and Jim, John, Ida, Lois, Nevin, and Quincy, they were all there representing everybody. And that's all we knew that some people knew about it, and that was about it. So those passed muster initially, but then we started realizing just how important stakeholder involvement was. So we're asking for more there. And we've been asked to give some examples, and the following slides have some examples. I didn't want to pull them out and say, these are the ones you should use. I was trying to find stuff that had good ideas in them that showed us that there was a concerted effort to include the right people at the right parts of the process. So here's an example. It's actually from Western Ohio. First, there's a list of those who were involved, the key partners working in it, and then exactly what was done. Representatives of the consulting firm and EPA had a kickoff meeting. There's a public stakeholder meeting in Rockford. It covered various 9-element plans, and then 4 additional meetings. That same example in the 9-element plan actually provided a document showing what the outreach flyer was about. What was I trying to see? Oh, so in the 9-element plan there, it actually goes into saying chapters 1, 2, and 3 were prepared using all the available information in the technical reports, but project 4 was compiled by the collaborative meetings. And that's a key point, is to see that when it came to developing projects according to goals and objectives, the collaborative meetings were the most important part. And so make sure that that's represented well. We've seen other 9-element plans that it was clear that the outreach did not happen, but yet we got projects in there saying that they would do various ag items, but there really was no outreach, and we didn't know that there was even a project there. So that's an important thing. Another example, this one, it looks like I pulled it from Tinker's Creek. Shows who was involved, what was represented during these various meetings, the mayor's breakfast. They shared critical area issues and potential projects with the stakeholders, etc. So every 9-element plan we've ever approved and the date we approved them is available for view. Those are all examples, and you can find good stuff in almost each and every one of them. Some of them, if they're older, you can see that there's an evolution on how these have progressed. Critical areas, why are they important? And you see I threw in the word source, critical source areas. Like Greg mentioned, these are when you have a cause of impairment, well, it's coming from somewhere, and there's categories of sources. So implementing BMPs and other complementary measures in critical source areas is a key part of meeting targets. And this is straight out of that BMP handbook, almost the first sentence, I think. So I have a link to that here. And there's actually some really good stuff on getting your mind around how to make those connections between the cause and the pathways to the sources and the areas where those sources are. So that's really the way to think about it. And again, as you're working through your own 9-element plan, we're more than willing to help you through that process. But describing the connections, and this comes from the same document. Delineate the contributing area to surface water. So you have all these sub-watersheds or areas that are affecting surface waters like stream corridors. Identify and characterize the sources. You're looking at land use and cover, and then you're looking at a more detailed characterization of potential specific sources, including sources within the transport system. A lot of times riparian corridor or stream bank issues or channelization may be the issue. Characterize the pathways, and then narrow the identification of the potential sources to a set of potential critical sources. So you're saying, well, I'm weighing the relative contribution from all the sources, and the most important ones are X, Y, and Z. Row crop agriculture, urban areas, a cluster of home sewage treatment systems, those types of things. And it's not, just like Greg said, every part of the watershed gets its critical area. That's not the way it should go. Real quick on critical areas upstream. This came about when we first started trying to do an example. We had a monitoring location that was at the upstream portion of a HUC 12 that was impaired, and the sources obviously at that location had to be coming from the upstream HUC. So what we suggest, and this goes for vice versa, upstream to downstream or downstream to upstream, cross-reference those critical areas. For instance, sediment and erosion issues in an upstream HUC could be contributing to sediment or habitat issues in the downstream HUC that you're working in. So if you make that tie-in, then you're opening up eligibility for practices between HUCs, and you get a little more latitude, I think, to create projects. Also, downstream, when you're looking at downstream, far field type of loading is definitely in play. So one thing that Domestic Action Plan 2.0 does is it provides some baseline loads for phosphorus by the HUC 12 level, and then that can be used as a basis to make incremental progress toward reducing that annual load. More questions on critical source areas. So we had people, a lot of these slides are gonna have a green box. These are the questions that came across our eyes. Please provide examples of source-based critical areas to solve common causes that are not geographically or political boundary based. Another person said, think of them as critical issues. Maybe setting up critical areas in alignment with strategies identified in the Ohio Non-Point Source Management Plan. So critical issues, the actual guidance from US EPA talks about critical areas. It talks about sources of pollution, and it talks about priority areas. They all get into that element C of what are the technical solutions and areas they should be installed. So critical issues, let's meet in the middle call. I like critical source areas actually, because it gets into what you see here in the table on the right. Urban and sediment nutrient reduction strategies in the state's non-point management plan. There's a listing of the types of practices, technical solutions that address the urban sources. Same thing for agricultural sources. Same thing for altered stream and habitat restoration. There's sections on each of these. So we oftentimes see critical areas as a prioritized urban area, maybe around a monitoring location, or maybe it's the urban area, the impermeable surfaces, a priority area of the urban area, impermeable surfaces. Same thing with ag. It might be row crop, but prioritized according to maybe a sub-watershed that has a higher load, or prioritized by folks who have not participated in ag programs, or proximity to stream, etc. A lot of times mapping these, you say, well, we're 75% ag. Why would we have a 75% ag critical area? It's okay to show where those areas are, and then to demonstrate that. And when we administer this program, our outreach is going to focus on these priority locations. And we've asked people to do that in the past. Altered stream and habitat, a lot of times folks will say the critical area is 100 feet on either side of the stream on all these streams, which gets at, and then you're prioritized beyond that on where the problem areas are. Some folks, it's a critical area where they know where exactly 3 locations are that are messed up and all the others are fine. You can do that too. And that's what, and Greg mentioned that as, one project or one location, project location could be a critical area. Same thing with high quality water protection strategies. Oftentimes those are areas that are in attainment, but not, but there's problem areas within them that are known. You might have a really well-performing watershed with high fish and bug scores, but there's one bank that is really cutting off, and you're starting to see sediment issues in the areas around it, but it doesn't, affect the whole watershed. So that's a good way to approach that. Critical source areas within each of these categories can be further refined and prioritized. Now, did I give you any examples of this? No. And only for, I got a lot of slides, and we got a lot to get through. But as these come up and you start looking at 9-element plans, these are all shown in every 9-element plan that's ever been approved. I would start with some of the more recently approved ones, because I think we've been improving the process on selecting those as we've been going. And with questions, always call us. We'll help you through. Oh, that's a slide that, okay. You weren't supposed to see that slide. Okay, high quality stream protection. Can you provide guidance on incorporating protection of high quality areas into critical areas? So you have a high quality stream and you're identifying why is it high quality? What is it about that area of high quality stream that's working in the landscape? Then describe what are the trends, what's going in the wrong direction? Is there more development, a loss of riparian corridor? I'll throw in, are there eroded banks that are occurring or developing? So you could develop in a high quality stream area, the riparian corridor, where what's working is threatened or is missing. So again, that way you're saying, yes, this is high quality, but this spot is bad. And the data is shown in this picture. We've done a bank erosion hazard index. We don't have IBI, ICI, or any of those other scores, but we think that it would show problems. Real quick, should something like this be funded, Ohio EPA would do the pre-monitoring for IBI, ICI, and QHEI, and then be able to determine after the project's over whether or not that problem was fixed. And that's kind of what we wanted to accomplish every time we go out. Far field loadings, what are we doing here? Okay. Far field loadings for Lake Erie and hypoxia. So this, I wrote this all out because this would be what your reference is for a critical area that is designed to reduce load. So for the Annex 4 water quality goals, and I combined some things here because there's probably about 5 items here, but I added I put all the rivers in each one. So 40% total spring load reduction in total and dissolved phosphorus entering Lake Erie's Western Basin, the Maumee, Portage, Toussaint, the Dusky Rivers by 2025, and then same for Central Basin. Mississippi Gulf, according to the 2015 Mississippi River Gulf of Mexico Watershed Nutrient Task Force, all states committed to an interim target of a 20% reduction in the amount of nitrogen flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. So some of these new 9-element plans that we funded in Southwest Ohio or the Ohio River Basin, we're going to start off by giving them a baseline load from row crop and urban. And then as time goes by, we do intend, just like we did for the DAP, to develop some baselines for all watershed, all 12 watersheds. So we can do similar type of non-point source planning around that goal of 20% nitrogen reduction. More questions, you can call me about that anytime, and we'll be getting in touch with the people receiving those grants with the same information. Please provide clear guidance on objective setting. This is the part where your outreach with stakeholders is going to be critical. But objectives are a listing of implementable practices that are needed to achieve water quality goals. These are what are the technical solutions? For load, you can calculate how much implementation activity times the load reduction estimate by practice, and that can help you see, are you making incremental progress toward your total load reduction goal? And you might only be able to bite off a little bit at a time. I don't think we're going to get over implementation in the short term, but any implementation is an incremental progress, and that's kind of what the 9-element interim milestones item covers. Again, a stepwise approach, identifying what can reasonably be implemented is advised. And so let's say your IBI and ICI scores are 5 points off, and you know about 4 or 5 locations that need fixed, and you've identified them and put project summaries together, but you're not sure that you're actually going to get, after they're all implemented and up and running and working well, that you're going to make you're going to reach your goal. That's why these are stepwise, and we install, monitor, reevaluate, and then reevaluate. Do we need more objectives? Do we need additional types of objectives? Same thing for load. Some 9-element plans, especially for the far field ones, they've gone as far as to say, here's how many of each of these implementable types of practices we will need according to models, reach our annual load reduction goal, and that's okay. Sometimes those are overly, overly optimistic that all those things can happen in a short term. And so it's also okay that say, right now our objectives are to do X number of, X, Y, and Z at the following rates. So that's objective setting is always a tough one, but what we want to start with is what technical solutions that will solve the goal can be marketed and implemented in the very short term in this watershed. And then we'll keep building on these and making and monitoring throughout time to improve, see how far along we are on the line. Objectives must be quantifiable. The objectives tie into the implementation measures item of 9 elements. The benefits, or what are the load reductions, or how far away are we from our water quality targets? That's item B, and then the milestones H. So B and H are always been pretty tough ones in project summaries for a lot of people. Goals and objectives must include a quantifiable output. Adaptive management. A lot of folks have always, and this was in our example document way back when. This is kind of a catch-all. It says we weren't sure exactly how many objective items were needed, will be needed to reach our goals. But we do know that as these objectives are implemented, water quality monitoring of both projects and regularly scheduled water quality monitoring will be conducted to determine progress toward meeting the identified goals. Where appropriate, these objectives will be reevaluated to determine and must have skipped a bunch of words. Anyway, long story short, we want to have that adaptive management as part of these plans that basically says, this is only the first cut, or this is the second cut. And as long as we're making incremental progress toward the goals by project, we're fine. And you should think that way. Goals development. So this is straight out of the template. The overall non-point source restoration goals are to improve IBI, Modified Index of Well-Being, ICI, and QHEI scores so that the partial and or non-attainment sites can be in full attainment of aquatic life use for that respective water body. So early on, we were focused on aquatic life use. Since then, Lake Erie issues have been brought to the forefront. We now have load reduction commitments. And so we are including load reduction as part of our non-point source implementation strategies for far-field targets. And those involved with that know what I'm talking about. Other 9-element plans that are under development, or I know will be coming out in the short term, will address impaired or threats to public drinking water supply for algae toxins, pesticides, and nitrate. Some of you might have heard about multi-bac TMDL, multibacteria TMDL, that identifies a lot of watersheds that are impaired for recreation due to bacteria. And what would it take to delist those for the same? Nobody has put that in a 9-element plan yet, but it's possible. You know, the types of practices to address that would be non-point source related home sewage treatment. If there's near a lake, there could be a wildlife component. There could be, you know, city ordinances and things like that. But it'd be a smaller part, but it would still be in the same 9-element plan. And the goals would be related to exactly what are the water quality metrics that would delist a watershed for bacteria. Can interim goals and non-water quality goals be included, and why? I was going to get farther involved with this one, but really these become case-specific type items, especially where there's maybe a high quality water and like I mentioned before, but there's problem areas within it. We would work with you on trying to figure out a way to tie a goal to water quality standards, whether it be interim or not, or one that's not traditionally a water quality goal, such as lake erosion hazard index or permeability percentages or things like that. Old versus new data, non-existent data. So getting on to the same thing. This came straight from the TMDL program. There is no such thing as old or new data. Apparently we used to list things as that had more than 10 years old water quality monitoring data. We would list it in the IR that the data was more than 10 years old. We took that out because there's, we have to list based on what information we have now. If anything changes, then that data is not valid anymore. We know that. We use our old data and then consider anything that's changed since the data was collected. And then when another effort happens, then we have the most recent data again. But there's no such thing as old or new data. It's, something could happen the day after monitoring and we're back to being old. So interim goals. So the question, is the data relevant? Most recent is relevant for the state of Ohio and for listing and delisting and regulatory purposes. So a lot of times we have old data or we have data that's historic, many years old. If we need to regulate based on that, a lot of times folks will say, well, that things have changed. We need to see something new. And a lot of times we're stuck to we have to commit to, okay, we will reevaluate with what's most recent, especially for regulatory purposes. But this is an important point. Data comes in all forms, photos, local observation, and local data are useful, especially when it comes to a site that's clearly problematic. So I used to say, by the pixel, photos are data. And we will work with you on questions on locating data or determining whether or not you should use what you have to substantiate a project, especially. Project summary sheets. These are the questions we had on project summary sheets. They're helpful for making projects grant ready. However, simplifying the format and making additional tools readily available would be helpful. So I'm gonna share with you additional tools. On the format, I'm sorry. I think the format is about as simple as we can make it. What might not be simple is if this project is not primed to be ready to be implemented, it might be hard to fill out these summary sheets, and maybe they aren't a short-term project in those respects. So if you have trouble filling out the project summary sheet, it might mean you don't have enough information and the project might not be ready. Another question, it would be helpful to have more clear guidance about the level of specificity required in project summary sheets, budget breakdown, degree, project concept, etc. How much change is acceptable? Oh, that's a different question. How much change is acceptable before a new project summary sheet must be submitted? I'll try to get into that. And then how much information does a project need? So I went back to our original template, which had a project summary and was filled out with, here's what needs put here. And I'm repeating it here in these next 3 slides. This may not be of interest to some, so you can close your eyes for a few minutes, but here we go. Again, the project summaries are in products. They are the bookshelf of ready to go projects. I have a spacer here, a catch-all. We think at this point, 9-element planning organizations should be keeping track of all the non-point source implementation, not just for funded projects, but for all the non-point source implementation happening in your HUP 12 or your county. It's a matter of accountability. It's a matter of showing leaders changes and trends on BMP implementation. It tracks money. It can do lots of things. So there'll be more coming out in the guidance on this. I think we need to work toward that. But back to the project summary sheet. So the first slot, title, name it. Don't give us too long a one, short's fine. Project organization, you know those. What is your HUP 12? Which critical area is this project in? And there's a nomenclature for all that in all these sections ahead of the project summary sheets. Project location, physical address, lat long. Be good to have access points. We use that when we're putting together study plans and getting monitoring crews together. So the better the information there, the better. Well, I know these also come in our applications. Which strategy is being addressed? Is it non-point source reduction, restoration, urban, all those items from the earlier one. Time frame. Project summary sheets, I'm going to say this straight out. I don't think you need one unless you have a short-term project. Medium-term and long-term projects, you probably don't know enough about to even fill out this sheet. We do have above the project summary sheet section in the template an overview table. That's where you put these immature or projects on the horizon type of things. And then you can as your team meets, you can review that overview table, add to it, and then start maybe ripening some of those. Short description, 250 characters or less. That's not very long. That's a paragraph. Concise synopsis. This would be something, if I had to tell somebody how great it was that we were going to give your organization $150,000 to do a project, but I only had about 30 seconds to do it. That's what I would want to see here. But as much information in a concise way as possible. Now the narrative talks about a little bit more about how it's going to happen, who's involved, where is it going to be done? How will, all these things that talk about, how fleshed out the project is. This is also a great place to say we have people who have committed to do these things. A lot of what we see is once we get funds, upon funding, we will reach out. Well, that's not good. That's not good. The outreach should already be done. You should have we have 10 landowners willing to install 8 grass waterways and commit to cover crops or something like that, or nutrient management, things like that. This is basically the beginning of your 319 application too. You'll draw a lot from these. Estimated cost, a lot of times we just see a number here. That suggests, especially if it's a really round number, it suggests that the project might not be fleshed out as much as we would hope. If possible, provide a breakdown by personnel, travel, etc. List any sources of cash or in kind. Also, where applicable, include a cost per units. So there's more to provide here that will show the funding agency that costs here have actually been broken down and are somewhat close. Sometimes none of that's happened, and it's surely an estimate, and we'll have to work with it that way. When project reviews come in and we're looking at projects, the ones that are more fleshed out obviously are easier to understand and usually get scored. Possible funding sources. Generally, if you have a project summary sheet, you're probably going to be looking at 319 or US or a GLRI type fund or hypoxia. B&H, I'm going to get more into this later. How much improvement? This is how far away are you from your water quality goals and objectives? Your IBI score is 3 points too low or 5 points too low. Your annual phosphorus loading needs to be reduced by 2,000 pounds from the baseline. That's part one. Part two is how much the needed improvement will be for the whole critical areas will be accomplished. A lot of times, so this is where we can bring in our objectives too. Let's say the objective is to install 10,000 linear feet of stream bank restoration, and this project does 1,000 feet. So that gets you about 10% of the way toward the objective. If that's the only objective to solve your goals, then maybe you would estimate 10% of the way toward that, or expect a half-point improvement. These are things that when the 9 elements were created, they were all load reduction related. And in Ohio, we have water quality standards based on biological goals and indicators. And so this is a way to work through that part of criteria B&H of the 9 element plan. And it took us a while. US EPA agreed to it, but there's always questions on it, and there will always be questions on it. And we will help you through that as you work through your process. Load reduced, we always, regardless of whether or not your critical area or your watershed has load reduction goals, we always have to report load reduction estimates. There are tools to do that. I'll get into those in a little bit. A big tool a lot of people use is they call me and we work it out, and we come to agreement on what a good estimate might be for their project. I wish there was a better way to say it, but it's not. Effectiveness. Usually, the effectiveness of the project, if it's using 319, a lot of people pull this out almost exactly. But others do have, local monitoring efforts that exist or are planned for the HUC 12. You can mention those. Feel free. We like to see more monitoring and understanding what's going on beyond the times we're out. Education and information. quantifiable, how is information about this project going to be shared? That's a part of every 319 project. How are we doing here? 11:18, I'm getting there. All right, project summary sheets. You can add on to these. Some folks on the project summary sheets will provide a screenshot or a image of the concept plan for the project. I'd like to see the budget breakdown. A lot of times we can learn a lot on the budget breakdown if there's what the eligible costs are versus ineligible, and we could discuss this with potential applicants. Photos are also good. A lot of people put photos of project areas within the 9-element plan, but you can add them in the project summary sheets too. But, quite frankly, oftentimes we have annual RFPs for 319 grants, and but other times we get requests from US EPA or GLRI or the hypoxia people saying, we need to fund $500,000 of projects. What do you have on tap? What can you give us? What do you have? And the vague project summary sheets where if we get money, we'll contact people. Those go right past our eyeballs. We look for things that are clearly fleshed out, that can clearly make progress toward what the priorities of whatever the grant fund comes from, and go from there. So project summary sheets are a big deal. Very important. Load reduction estimates. Real quick, next week, right after our presentation, right after this workshop ends, there's a user training on Step L. Highly encouraged for anybody, watershed planners, state and local authorities. I'll be on there. So I recommend you guys register for that. OSU has a new extension bulletin. It's virtual, it's online. Go to agbmpsosu.edu, click on best management practices. There's a laundry list of what each practice is, how they work, relative effectiveness. We still have the Region 5 model spreadsheet. If anyone needs a copy of that, we can use that. It's especially useful for urban and stream bank restoration projects estimates. TNC, I'm not sure. I don't know if they posted this online, but at the end of December 2019, they had a really nice report come out on the cost benefits of best management practices in Ohio. I have that document. Jessica D'Ambrosio forwarded it to me, and so we can get that to you if you want to see it. Addressing point sources and non-point source implementation strategies. So a lot of times we're talking specifically about non-point sources. Development of these plans is non-regulatory, not required. You don't have to do it. No one has to do it. Those who have projects in those that are potentially fundable, and that's why they do it. Quite frankly, the state is looking at 9-element plans to solve some of our far field goals, to at least make progress on far field goals. And these are a good way to account for those. But every HUC 12, a lot of HUC 12s have point sources. So we know we have permitting programs, and they're on top of, requiring problem wastewater treatment facilities or other NPDES type of permittees to do the right thing. We have municipal discharges, industrial, stormwater, biosolids application sites, CAFOs, and others that are permitted. We don't need to say what or how those are being dealt with, but what you can do is say, here are the ones that exist in this watershed, and briefly describe, the impacts of each. You can find a lot out about these, whether there's been non-compliance in the past, if they've expanded, and other things. So along the same lines, and I know CAFOs is here, but a lot of regulated facilities in Ohio are what are called CAFs, concentrated animal feeding facilities, as regulated through the Department of Agriculture. It would be good, we've suggested in Northwest Ohio especially, that an inventory be provided. So if there are BMPs or priority BMPs on the row crop agriculture that relate to manure, those priorities could be accounted for and focused on. I should have just put this first and had no slides. Can't figure it out, call us. So there are always unique situations and we get calls a lot. I'm offering Teams as a way to do that. It'll be a lot easier to share, what I'm talking about with folks. Greg can do the same thing. New authors or NineElement groups are encouraged to get a hold of us up front so we can get you a leg up. We provide suggestions, we point toward data, and we, quite frankly, will give you the candid review comments you need to take back to your group and work toward a final product. All right, updates. Someone said, well, what do NineElement updates look like? How much stakeholder involvement must be had? And what's our role in coordinating the review? So let's say you have a NineElement plan that's been approved 3 years ago and an entity says, we have a great project. We think it's the best ever. We want to get it funded. And they call us and we say, well, it's already a NineElement plan and you need to work with the Soil and Water District to update that plan. So Greg and I just talked this morning and I said, well, we don't have anything in our guidance about this. Why don't we go with this and say this is open for comment, but this is the way I think it should go. Let's say you want to add a project to an existing NineElement plan. That project holder, whoever is involved with that project being developed, should review the existing NineElement plan and contact the plan authors to discuss and agree upon adding to or updating the NineElement plan for update. But make sure, does the proposed project that they want to add fit within the existing critical areas and objectives? If it does, then it's pretty easy to create a project summary sheet because that line has been established and it fits that line, and you fill out the project summary sheet. And really all we get at that point would be a new NineElement plan with with that new sheet inserted in it. The author would say, all we're doing here is we've added a sheet to page 42 as page 42, and we updated the overview table and changed the date. But if it does not, then that stakeholder group should work together to update the critical areas or objectives if they agree that this is even an appropriate project to solve the water quality issues. So, and you provide the new summary sheet. Oh, for gosh sakes. How did I get that off of here? I'm sorry, guys. Nope. 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 Maybe someone else take control and tell me what to do.
Oh, what's going on, Rick?
I can't see my.
Oh, you've lost your controls.
You guys see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
You can hear me. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. If there is a NineElement plan update, we suggest that the original authoring entity submit that to the state for review. There's questions along the way between either the folks who want to install the project or the authoring entity, call us and we'll work through whatever we need to do. Updates relative to RFP timing. What timing do the agencies want in terms of sending a plan update in advance of Section 319 application RFPs. Should the updates be sent in tandem, or do they need to be submitted beforehand? How far in advance? So yeah, that's a great question. Updates, and I know when RFPs come out, that's when everyone says, oh, what about our 9-element plan? Are they ready? Are they up to date? I get that, but we also can schedule once or twice a year, maybe the team gets together to review these in the absence of RFP timing. But with that said, there's an RFP coming out from Ohio EPA probably in mid to late October, the next round. We do have a lot of new 9-element plans that have been approved this year. There are some under development, and I've already, people are already saying, okay, we'll be updating and sending those in soon. So don't wait until the RFP comes out to develop a project update or send us a new plan. We would want to see those all day, every day, if we could. We hope those don't happen just when RFPs come out. Timing wise, we won't wait for 9-element plans to be approved. If we're asked to provide funding selections or funding selection recommendations by our chief or our director tomorrow, we can only send those recommendations for those who have projects in approved 9-element plans. So we aren't gonna say, well, this one was a good one if we could only get their 9-element plan approved. It'll just have to wait and go off the list until the next funding cycle. And quite frankly, points are lost during the review. We had, I would say, maybe 40%, 30% of our applications this last go around came in either with a new 9-element plan, an updated 9-element plan, or a promise that a 9-element plan was coming. So quite frankly, a lot of those lost points and didn't make it. Pro tips. We're almost done here, guys. Pro tips. Ag buy-in. A lot of questions. I went in on this earlier. Sometimes we have clear projects that describe the exact type of ag project that's going to be implemented, and then sometimes we get the opposite. So there's a bunch of opportunities to install and implement conservation on the landscape. Having the outreach and the availability to do outreach to get people interested, to let them know that there's funds available is a big deal. Buy-in is critical. Use of SWC technicians, OSU Extension, or other support from local and state commodity groups to get folks interested, or to get them on board with looking for solutions is critical. I think next week we'll probably hear a little bit more about the Ag Conservation Planning Framework, but it's a tool, GIS related tool that helps identify where the best conservation opportunities, especially for water retention, treatment, and management go. So it's a mapping system that looks at hydrology, land use, cropping history, et cetera, to identify the best locations for things like grass waterways, lost cobs, wetlands, drainage water management, et cetera. So those are big tools on getting buy-in. If you can get outreach to landowners where there's clear opportunities for conservation with science behind it, I think that could be a big step forward. And a lot of people are already trying that out. I didn't want to get too far into ACPF with this conversation, but I think it's a tool that's just ready to pop in the ag world. Agricultural buy-in. I got this screen on top of my. Agricultural BMPs and producer buy-in. So again, what needs to be in a project summary sheet? Well, ideal would be you demonstrate targeted outreach. Participants have been identified. The SWCD has for example, the SWCD has identified 6 producers have agreed to install yada yada yada. ACPF usage is a very important tool for identifying the best locations. Noting in these project summaries that the practices are already surveyed or designed, the budget's already been laid out, and the entire project, whether or not, let's say someone's had 5 different landowners, they want to do 4 different types of practices, but you already know what each and every one of those are and where they'd be, that would be one good project. Might cost $200,000, might cost $80,000. That'd be one good project where you've specifically said we have 4 locations for 6 of these, 4 of these, 200 acres of this, versus what we see in others, which is there's no outreach described, no specific buy-in provided. The project summary will say the SWCD will work with. You see a laundry list of BMPs without locations. There's not a mention of design or existing capacity within the organization to move that the funding occurs. And you see multiple summary sheets that say for individual practices, one summary sheet might be just for cover crops, one might be just for drainage water management, one might be just for grass waterways. And then they say at the end, well, we could combine all these summary sheets. And we've let that go in the past, and we understand what's behind that. Quite frankly, we're looking to fund good ag installations. But there's more ideal situations and there's the more marginal ones. I'm not saying marginal won't work, but we prefer it to be better. And quite frankly, when these opportunities come from US EPA on do you have projects, the ones on the right, we would skip over because there's no clear link that these practices will happen. B&H, I have this in here just for reference for later. Quite frankly, I don't want to go through this, but B&H are always the 2 big ones on what folks are trying to, when they're doing their project summary sheets. How far are you away from removing the impairment? And how much needed, what will this project accomplish, both for progress toward the goals and project toward the objectives? Appendices, do we want appendices? Sure, you can put appendices. We'd like to just have them all in the same document. Information might include calculations, etc. So yeah, you can add an appendices section. A lot of folks want to know, well, do you want to see all the calculations for showing that we can meet a load reduction? Sure, that would be fine. It would help as you guys progress later down the line with new stakeholders and new people helping out with updates. That doesn't need to be in the main section of the document, but it is a useful thing for users to have access to. You can also add photos, conceptual designs, and other budget calculations to the project summary sheets, just like we mentioned before. Funding eligibility and funding organization priorities. Please discuss 319 priorities for this and future years. Some practices like cover crops are not a priority for 319 funding, but SWCDs want to focus some of those efforts. So real quick, and a lot of this comes from the RFPs that we put out, but 319 RFPs have prioritized more recently for prioritized funding for structural conservation practices over ephemeral conservation practices. Like the ephemeral would be ones that this year I managed my nutrients differently, or this year I didn't till, or this year I planted cover crops. Next year, it could be back to the same. So that we were advised that we should focus our priorities on long-lasting BMPs, because twofold: USDA, NRCS provides funding for that, and so does H2 Ohio. We do want to see projects that have the highest probability to achieve water quality goals when implemented. And this is mentioned throughout, innovative water retention and treatment systems in both ag and urban landscapes are priorities. Wetlands, riparian corridor, and stream restoration are priorities. Dam removals are priorities. What if projects are not fundable through 319? So are project summary sheets still required? No, they're not required unless the only time one is required is if you're asking for 319 or US EPA, GLRI, or hypoxia funding. But consider how this level of planning can be used to demonstrate to other funding sources that there is an in-motion strategic plan developed to accomplish a variety of conservation practices using a variety of sources of funding to realize mutual and/or closely aligned water quality goals amongst funding institutions. So project summary sheets are really you know, that's your pre-proposal for almost any project. It's sitting right there, and it shows funders that, hey, we're ready. Real quick discussion on water, state and attainment of beneficial uses. So when this all first started, we talked about aquatic life use. There's lots of causes of impairment to aquatic life use and a lot of associated sources. That's the big one that we mostly focus on. But recreation can be impaired by bacteria, cause, or algae in Lake Erie. Aquatic water supply, nitrates, algae toxins, and pesticides, all would be, you know, you would have goals to remove listings for those types of things. Fish tissue, the last one, I'm not going to cover a lot here because it's mostly legacy point source related. That would be like human health and fish tissue consumption. Tools and resources, getting down to the wire here. I'm just going to point at these. I'm not going to go through them with you, so you guys can take a deep breath. We have new ones, tools and resources. We have a new tab called Approved 9-Element Plans. This was the original one that used to have everything under it. Now this just has a list of approved plans. This next tab, 9-Element Tools, includes what you see on this slide. We have a TMDL resources section as well. So here we go. On the NPSIS development tools side, we have useful maps and GIS layers. So this is a place to look at land use, where permits are, where monitoring locations are. There's a lot here, and I'd love to go through it with you. And if we had time, we would, but we're not going to. Then the template, that is what everyone starts with. And there's still a lot of good information on what should be in each and every section of the 9-Element Plan. The guide that we discussed earlier is under review or under update, and as of today, we hope to get this done by the end of the year. The handbook on source area, critical source area, is available here. All the watershed action plans are available here. Then the interactive map of existing 9-Element plans in Ohio is linked in here. And for those of you who have looked at it recently, before today, we just updated it, and we now have all 131 plans on that map. Thank you to Melinda Harris for that. On that new tool for all the maps that are available, you can go straight to your HUC in the integrated report. You can go straight to the list of 9-Element plans. You can go straight to the hydrologic units, and then you can see where every stormwater permit, every NPDES permit, CAFO permit, stream wetlands mitigation sites, and biosolids are all there. And then you can use links on these ones to download data sets and shapefiles. Land cover 2016, wetlands, cities, villages, lakes, state parks, aquatic life use monitoring locations is a big one. Roads and townships. Now on that next tab, we have a TMDL program resource page. At that, and I cut some out here, way too many words. I just want to point you toward the link to the TMDL report page by Watershed. The integrated water quality monitoring assessment report is available. All the technical support documents, including some of the charts that you guys like to see, are available. Something new called the loading analysis plan is available. There's a good example provided here, the Lower Scioto. There's a report in the fact sheet. Basically, it's a more granular approach on looking into exactly what's wrong and analysis of the data. Held by Waterway is a new tool provided by US EPA, and it basically uses Ohio EPA databases on how we report things by watershed, and can get you pretty good information as well. That's the US EPA document. All right. Sign up for updates to TMDLs. Every time anything changes with any watershed with the TMDL program, there's updates provided, and you can get that notice by signing up here. Real quick, Appendix F. You guys have seen this table before. It's really, really good one to say, okay, our habitat's screwed up. Why? Why is our habitat screwed up? at this location, and it says, oh, we got silt, channelization, and no cover, all those things. Those are really good to insert on your condition, and it helps focus objectives, quite frankly. Those have all been moved to Appendix F of technical support documents if you're having trouble finding those. Real quick, lake area assessments and large river assessments are also listed as impaired or in attainment. A lot of times your 9 or your 12-digit HUC watershed assessment unit may include a segment that's also a big river unit. And you can establish critical areas while we still are using the main HUC 12 as the basis for the 9-element plan. You can refer to segments that may be in non-attainment within your HUC and use those as use goals within those, to establish critical areas and things like that. What comes to mind is like dams in big rivers that are clearly the reason for non-attainment in these large river HUCs. Lake area assessment units, again, you can reference those as downstream issues. Other resources, Ohio's Domestic Action Plan 2.0 is where you can find load reduction targets for HUC 12s in Appendix A. And then I think tomorrow or next week sometime we should be providing a new update to our non-point service management plan. Not a lot changed there, but it's new, and there's that'll be coming soon. There'll be a link for that. And like I said, the interactive map was just updated today. That's what it looks like. Scroll in, click on your watershed, and you can pull up the plan from those. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rick, on your sharing your presentation and taking that deeper dive into the NPS program. We have a couple of questions that have come through. Greg has helped out quite a bit and answered some of them in the chat, but there is one question that several have sort of spoken on, and the question is, can Ohio EPA and ODA help get the needed information from USDA for the ACPF? Someone commented that, Rick, you have helped, you and the South and the SWCD staff to obtain the HUC 12 file geodatabases created by ARS. And each time ARS has created and provided them to Rick or to the Conservation District, but ARS will not provide them to a contractor. So Greg thought it would be good information, Rick, for you to speak on this topic.
You guys still hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, that's the ACPF in Ohio is still evolving. A lot of entities, Ohio State University, NRCS, ODA, and Ohio EPA all have interest in this. Iowa is looking for the state, every state that to have its own standalone committee to be like the warehouse or the warehouse for keeping these plans and the data for these plans. It hasn't been hard for state agencies or soil and waters to get the information they need. And quite frankly, if you work through us and we try to get, if you're having trouble getting those local land use or crop history or whatever shape files, we'll work with you to the nth degree as much as we can to get you that information. Quite frankly, I'm not a GIS expert and I don't even know how to ask the questions, but we were able to work directly with the Ames, Iowa folks to get the files necessary to develop these plans early on, but there will be more to come. I think the state really is looking forward to extensive coverage through ACPF map development throughout the state. There's opportunities, big opportunities there on implementation and outreach. So I know that didn't answer the question, but we'll get you the information you need if you need it.
Okay. Now, is there an easily accessible listing of a livestock inventory for the CAFFs. Public inquiry requests often take longer response time than the 3 to 6 month time frame.
No, I don't. Yeah, as it is now, to get livestock inventories from ODA, I think that takes a public request. If there's a specific, I've worked as an intermediary on some of these asks before. Some of it's pretty easy. How many calves are there and what type are they, and we don't need to know where they're at or anything beyond that they have a certain number of animals. Same thing goes for small operations. What it comes down to is you're looking as a committee or a planning group on here are our water quality issues, and they come from what? Well, they come from in this case maybe row crop. Okay, what are the pathways? Is it commercial fertilizer usage? Is it manure usage? Is it the way the fields drain? All those things. So that's what they're for. And beyond that, we don't need to know a whole lot more about them. And quite frankly, we don't need to see that in there. But what it just gives the planning committee and the document user an idea of what's the relative level of activity based, row crop, industry, animal agriculture, conservation parks and things like that. So it's more of a watershed characterization item. If you cannot find CAF information, again, we'll work with you on locating that information. But that is a little more difficult for CAF stuff, I think, without a public information request.
All right, well, can you comment on the need for conservation easements at proposed projects? Does the 319 program fund fee simple purchases of high quality areas in critical areas? Maybe that's high quality acres in critical areas.
319 doesn't pay for land purchase. I think we do pay for acquisition of the easement. So we don't, up to the point where I'm trying to think that came out of left field. So what do you think about that?
Rick, is it true that Ohio EPA will pay for a conservation easement if it's directly associated with the BMP and you need to protect that BMP, like a riparian planting or something like that?
Right. Well, we would pay for the easement or the environmental covenant, but we would not purchase land.
Okay, there's
Quite frankly, if you have specific questions about that, we get these a lot, and there's always nuances to them. And I usually talk to our fiscal manager about them when those questions come in.
okay, there was one additional question. Well, actually, I have two more. The first one is, you mentioned in your presentation about a Huck 8, and someone wanted to know what might be covered in the Western Central Ohio under the contract that you mentioned in your presentation.
Rick, I think that's relative to the grants you just awarded for the Miami.
Yeah, I don't remember what slide we were on.
The question is, so the state was provided a grant from US EPA headquarters relative to the Gulf hypoxia. And we had an opportunity to do whatever we wanted with about $200,000. And we decided, well, we don't have very many 9-element plans developed in central southwest Ohio or the Ohio River Basin particularly. So we focused on agricultural lands that we models show are the highest ag nutrient loading watersheds in the Ohio River Basin in Ohio. We prioritize those, and we'll be entering contracts in with several applicants here in the next month or sooner. And there may be even more people we select because we were just notified that they might have had extra money. So we didn't select there's more we might be able to fund. Not very many more, but more.
Okay, now I know we're going to share a video of this presentation, but Rick, would you be willing to also share maybe a PDF of your presentation? We got a couple of requests for that also.
Yeah, I will. Here's what I'll do. I need to clean up a couple of those places that were screwed up, but I will post it on our website.
Oh, okay, that'll be great.
Now I'll also merge in. Well, me and Greg will merge them together and then post it. It might be a week or so, but that should be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
And again, quite frankly, I can Teams call or Zoom call anybody anytime. I'm just sitting here in my bedroom.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. And that's all the questions we have, and we'll turn it back over to Teresa.
Hello, everyone. I'm just pulling up my concluding slides here. So if you could give me a moment. Okay. First of all, thank you to the speakers. That was a great presentation, and we really appreciate your knowledge and expertise, and sharing all the great resources that are available to anybody that's interested in creating a plan. As a wrap up, I'd like to thank our Ohio Stormwater Association Platinum sponsor, Butler County Stormwater District. These workshops and other webinars would not be possible without our sponsors. We also have our gold level sponsors, the City of Dayton Department of Water, as well as Westler Engineering. And then our silver level partners, Stormwater Inspect, Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, Palmer Engineering, Sustainable Streams, Strand Associates, FTC&H, and Davie Resource Group. Thank you all for your support. We greatly appreciate it. And if you are part of a company or organization that is interested in sponsoring the Ohio Stormwater Association, we would love to have your support. Organization partner levels, platinum is $5,000, gold is $1,000, and silver is $500. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please reach out to either Kathy Dorman, Kelly Kubander, or Bob Lentz, and their addresses are shown there below. We are also seeking volunteers to serve on various committees. As I mentioned earlier, these are our current committees, and if you're interested in joining any of them, you can reach out to myself, Teresa McGady, or Ohio Stormwater Association board member, or reach out to Kathy Dorman for more information about these committees. I also wanted to mention our upcoming Ohio Stormwater Association events. Obviously, if you registered for this workshop, we have the follow-up one a week from today, same time, 10 a.m. till noon. It will be case studies. I think it'll be great to kind of get a better understanding of how these plans are being implemented. Greg and Rick did a great job of kind of giving us the background and how to, but then we'll all, get a chance to hear from some really excellent speakers from around Ohio that will provide, some more insight as to how they are implementing plans. Also on November 19th, we have a webinar scheduled that will be with Dan Bogoveski on Ohio EPA audits. And in conclusion, I would like to thank all of our speakers and our host, Greg Nageotte, Rick Wilson. You guys did an awesome job. We greatly appreciate your expertise. And also Dana with the Water Management Association of Ohio. She has been running everything behind the scenes, and we greatly, greatly appreciate your support. So feel free to reach out to any of us if anybody has any questions, and we will do our best to get back to you. Thank you.